you so much, everybody, for joining us today for our session on demystifying the metrics conversation.
I'm David Summers with the Field Enablement team, and I'm with John. John, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm John Jeremiah, and I'm with David Summers. I lead product marketing.
We're excited to share this with you today. We get lots of feedback of like one of the hardest parts of applying that command of the message methodology is around the metrics conversation. And you should know you're not alone. Like Force Management shares that this is often some of the feedback they get from their clients, that this is one of the more difficult parts. So look forward to diving in. We're going to start today with just some interactive polling just to keep everybody on their toes. So,
which means we want to hear from you.
So please, hopefully you see the poll now. If you will please cast your vote. And for those not participating or watching the virtual, it's were you aware of the Demystifying the Metrics Conversation Handbook page prior to today's session? All right, so it looks like a third said yes, about 2/3 said no. So that's helpful information. We'll end that poll. Second question. Let's see. So obviously the 2/3 that didn't see the page are going to say no to this, but for those that have seen the page or were aware of it, have you watched the videos? This is all anonymous. Nobody's going to chase you down. All right, so less than 1 out of 5 have watched the videos. So that'll be a key piece today of one of the calls to action is to carve out some time. There's some really, really compelling resources on that page. We've gotten a lot of positive feedback from your peers that have checked it out. And all right, one more question, one more poll. So I mentioned that many sellers find the metrics conversation difficult. So this question is, what do you find to be the most difficult part? So choose the one answer that is most applicable. If you don't see one that resonates with you, there is an other option. What we'd love for you to do is if you choose other, please put, what is your challenge in the chat window. We're recording this session and we'll take a look at, other responses afterwards. So John, what are your thoughts as you see these?
I don't see the results.
Oh, well, there was a miss on my part.
It's okay.
I'm gonna, all right, last 5 seconds to put your vote and then I'll share the results.
Cool.
All right, sharing the results. Are you able to see those?
Yeah.
So, John, what do you think of what you see here?
It's about what I expected. Frankly, I think it's optimistic. If that means that 47% of the customers out there are actually measuring their software development process, that's amazing. I would think that number would be even higher.
This just means that's the hardest one. It doesn't mean it's not hard at other ones.
Yeah, good point.
I mean, my experience at least has been that more often than not, the majority of the people I talk to, and 53% in this case is the majority, but the majority don't have effective process metrics or measures in place.
All right, thanks
everyone. It's always been hard.
Thanks for providing your input. And again, if you put other, if you would please put what your other comment would be in the chat window. We'll take a look at that later. So the rest of this session today, we're going to pivot to talking about 5 practical tips to help make this metrics conversation less intimidating. So let me stop sharing there. And this is the page, right? So we link directly from command of the message. I'll show you where you can get to it. So on the main command of the message homepage, you can find this demystifying the metrics conversation as part of the core content. And the first one we'll talk about, so we're not going to cover everything here, but one of them is what you shared, right? Is that Nico talks about the challenge that most organizations are simply not measuring today. And I view this, and hope you do as well, is like, this is an opportunity. This is your chance. You are the subject matter expert. We are the subject matter experts on how to help them get to where they can measure the efficacy of their software development practices. So lean into that, right? You are the trusted advisor. So first and foremost, I think it's a mindset shift of just knowing that this is an opportunity for you to add value to that conversation. Your call to action for this section, as embracing the role as the trusted advisor, is to check out these videos. One of the things we've done here is to make these bite-sized. And we've gotten a lot of positive feedback on how small these are. So I'll click play just to show. You know, this is, I think this is the longest video. It's 6 minutes. The one up here where Nico talks about organizations not measuring.
So first of all,
less than a minute and a half. So please do watch watch Nico's short videos. I also want to bring your attention to, Nico shared his insights of how he opens up the conversations, again, as that trusted advisor. We've been there, we've done that, we can help you. So he kicks it off. If you're like other organizations that we speak with, below are some of the common challenges that they encounter. So rattle off a couple that you typically see. You can leverage these, or feel free to come up with ones that you feel comfortable and confident talking about, and then ask them, is that true of your organization? Right? Great place to start the conversation. And then Nico also talks about as playing the role of the trusted advisor, it's absolutely critical we understand what problems our technology helps to solve. And that's exactly really the purpose of customer use cases. So encourage everybody, and it will continue to repeat that of use case, really helping customers understand where and how GitLab is uniquely positioned to be the best solution to solve those challenges. So with that, let me pass it to John for the next section, next tip.
Sure. Awesome. So, if you're going to be that storyteller, let me share my screen really quickly. I want to just share my screen really quickly to make sure I just anchor back to, I want to show an image because I think it's relevant based on what you just said, David. Because if we're really talking about use cases, what is a use case, right? And I've used this view, I've created this view recently to help illustrate, to simplify this. The use case is really about people, personas who have a problem in their development lifecycle and their workflow. That problem is costing them money. It's causing a problem. They need to fix that problem. And so when we built the use cases, we built it around trying to understand what those problems are, and then how does GitLab uniquely solve that problem? And all of the work we've been doing for the last several months has been all around how do we better define and document what these problems and pain points are. And so the term use case, just set it aside. Just realize we're focusing on their problems and their solutions and our solutions to how do we help them solve that problem. So as we get into this and as you meet with customers, really the opportunity that all of you have, and I'll say this a couple of times, I think, is an opportunity to learn from each of them as you have your conversations and as you listen and start to tell stories, right? The stories that you want to try to be able to tell are stories of how we've helped other people to solve similar problems. I don't know if Mark's on. Mark Kritz, is he on? I'm going to call Mark out. Mark did it yesterday and today in Commit, where he told a story about how so many of his customers in the intelligence community have this air-gapped network problem. So he tells a story about the problem they're having and how GitLab then solves that. And he did a GitLab presentation. He did a commit presentation on it specifically. But those stories are what allows you to connect. And as you listen and you start to tell those stories, whether it's case studies that we've published, take Goldman Sachs as an example, You could take other case studies that have really, really solid metrics about showing the benefit and improvement. We can start to then connect with customers, and they can start to understand both better about their problem and how it's been solved and how other people have measured solving their problem. But it really means carefully listening. And one of the things I've stressed to a lot of people, and I know, Ryan, when you've taught people about note-taking and doing discovery calls, it's active listening to start to understand what their problems are and where their problems are, so we can start to tease out, well, what's the benefit? What's the value of fixing and solving these problems? I'm going to pause for a moment. I want this to be interactive at some point. I know we'll have time for it at the end.
Go ahead, Sonia.
Yeah.
John, actually, could I ask a question?
You could ask another one. Yes.
Awesome.
First one was free. Second one, yeah, go for it.
Thank you. So, I'm just 3 months into this role, and I'm curious to understand, I feel like we reference a lot of enterprise-sized customers with our case studies, and I'm curious to know from your perspective, what commercial customer stories could the commercial team utilize in their storytelling to help their customers understand the metrics that matter the most to that segment? And I want us to think about it from both an SMB and a mid-market perspective.
So, it's interesting. We've been updating, David and I, we've been working on updating the value framework, and I don't have it open. I don't have it in one of my 2,000 tabs that are open. We've been working on a version 2 of the value framework is coming. Version 1.2 of the value framework is almost done. We'll be communicating it, I think, next week, or publishing it like at the end of the week. And the part of it includes a section, thanks, David, the proof points. And in the proof points, if you can scroll down to the proof points, there's 2 places that you can get these stories. And these stories are relevant for across different segments. And we organized it in here. And it's also not only here, but stop right there, David. In the proof points link on the left, there's a link to it that takes you to a proof points page that has all the proof points in a single handbook page. But here we've highlighted it based upon the different value drivers. And you'll notice that we've organized it based upon mid-market or SMB. And one of the things we've done recently is we've pulled from the proof points page some of the ones that we think are highlighted and worth highlighting here, where in fact there are metrics associated. You take a look at Chorus as an example that, of how they reduce cycle time and they built faster. And, that's a story about GitLab Ultimate, right? And how they incorporated security, or Jasper Solutions, how they also reduce cycle time. So the metrics are there. And I don't think these metrics are fundamentally different because of the size of my organization. I mean, at the end of the day, that kind of gets to this next section, which is where we would talk about different kinds of metrics. But I want to pause to make sure, Kelly, that I answered your question.
You did. Thank you so much. I haven't seen this iteration of the value framework yet, so I appreciate you sharing it with me. Yeah.
Well, this is an evolution. It's a lot of the same stuff is here. We've added to it new case studies. We've added a couple new things. David, if you can scroll a little bit further, I'll just showcase a couple of things in here that we added. We added a couple new industry awards to it. You'll notice the 2020s. And then under analyst relations on the next page, and each one of these sections we added it is a link to the total economic impact, which is the Forrester study where they analyzed and they talked to 4 different customers. Granted, these were all enterprise customers, but they talked to them about the economic impact of rolling out GitLab, and they gathered that data. And then the other one that I think is worth noting, and Mahesh is going to do enablement on it next week, we added the links to it here, is he's been working on building a ROI model that's both standardized, and he's going to do enablement on that. And so I included links to both his slides and the model sheet here, so you have that as available as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Happy to help. There was another question. I think was it Adam?
Yeah, I'm always talking. It's being recorded. Is that me? Who's the background?
Echo. Go for it, Adam.
So there's a couple of proof points I added in the notes. So Chris Hill did a talk, and he talks about the metrics piece for T-Mobile with AWS. So there's a webinar we did. So a lot of times it's better to have the customer tell the story than us telling the story if there's another customer struggling with metrics. And Chris kind of is using some of the Dora examples in there. And then there was another one I threw in there I lost the document. Oh, the Google people from Dora talk about measuring DevOps. It was a talk yesterday.
I'll talk to that.
Yeah,
let me talk about that in a minute.
I'll let you talk about it. And then there's another customer, SMB. I think they were Issue Track. I got to find the link.
Yes.
They were talking about a whole bunch of metrics and why it was good. It just wasn't pulled out specifically as metrics. There was a lot of really good examples yesterday is all I'm trying to say. That's it.
No, yesterday was fantastic. And we're going to be cultivating and pulling from that some of these stories, because these are the things that are going to live on. We had over almost 100 speakers, different speakers who presented. So it was awesome. But thank you for that, Adam, and you're spot on. So I want to talk a little bit about the kind of metrics you should be looking for. And I think at the simplest of terms, and we included in here, there's two different metrics, right? There's a metric of the economic impact. And you think about business metrics of what is the business impact that a change will have. We're talking about increasing revenue. We're talking about lowering cost. We're talking about the fundamental metrics that are going to drive people making business decisions about they're going to buy or whether they're going to buy something or not. At the end of the day, and this Kelly may be true that in commercial and smaller organization it may be less true, but I know in large enterprises, anytime there's a large purchase of a significant amount of money, and I think it's really relative to the organization, there has to be a business case. Somewhere along the way, that leader who's making the decision to say we need to spend some of our money and resources on a tool and we need to change to adopt this tool or technology, they have to justify that to their leaders. They have to justify it to the CFO. There is a process for all of them, and they have to be able to demonstrate and talk about what will be the business impact of how they're going to do that. And the more we can become dialed into understanding those business metrics, the metrics that are really related to revenue, related to growth, related to lowering cost, related to lowering risk. If you're talking to the public sector, a lot of times they will quantify risk. Then it's going to be easier for them to make the business case. It's also, I think, really important that you're having a conversation about how are they going to build their business case internally, because that'll help us later on when we want to talk about case studies in the future, when we want to talk about what was the impact, what was the benefit of adopting GitLab. Now, but that's part of the story. If you're an IT leader and you're focusing on implementing and getting better at adopting DevOps, and we want to get better, I think that the Dora metrics are absolutely the best thing since sliced bread that are out there. The Dora metrics, if you're not familiar, Dora stands for DevOps, DevOps Research and Assessment Team. It was a little group started by Nicole Forsgren and Gene Kim and Jez Humble, and they started 3 years ago or 4 years ago, going off doing really detailed research into DevOps adoption. And Nicole, because she's a statistician and has a PhD in numbers, I think they have a PhD in numbers, she got really into making sure that all of the research was really statistically sound and really detailed. And if you ever want to have a really entertaining conversation, get her to defend her metrics. It's kind of painful, but it's fun. And they worked really hard at this. And in their most recent report, came out 1.5 years ago, they highlighted what they thought were the 4 key metrics that broke out and distinguished between organizations that were of mediocre performance versus those that were excelling. And those 4 metrics are outlined here, and we've built a page that details these so you can read it fast and get the Reader's Digest version of it. But these 4 metrics were the keys that they suggested organizations should be measuring, because it really were indicators of performance. How often are they deploying? That's pretty straightforward, pretty simple. How long does it take from when they start change to when it gets to production? Lead time. It's called lead time in the industry. You could call it cycle time, the way we would call it, but it's the lead time for changes. Cycle time is a lot of times what we would call it. How long does it take to recover when something goes down, if they have to come back, if they have to fix something that broke? And then how often do changes going into production fail? And what's really interesting is they did a lot of research around these metrics and how valuable they are. And then they kept using it. Now, the thing that came out of yesterday's commit, and actually we ran it this early in the morning, we ran the keynotes again, is the team at Google. Google acquired Dora. Google bought Dora last year. And then Nicole Forsgren, she went to go work at GitHub. But Jez Humble and the Dora stuff still lives at Google Cloud. And Google Cloud has taken it a step farther, and they've actually built a tool that will suck the data out of an existing system. And they actually talk about it in their keynote, and will showcase the data, the real data from an existing DevOps toolchain as into those 4 dimensions. Very cool stuff. It's stored on GitHub today. The project it's open source. And I actually have an open issue with Dan and a couple other people to think about how can we take this and adopt it for us. I also have another conversation with Mayank about, well, if Google Cloud's our partner, why wouldn't they move their stuff to GitLab versus GitHub? So 2 separate conversations. But it's a really powerful thing to get to. But understanding in your conversations these 4 metrics will raise your knowledge and will raise your profile with customers if you talk to them about how are they doing against these metrics.
John, a couple comments here. So the difference between cycle time and lead time, it's when we start measuring, okay? Just to be short on that one. And then the second point is, so why we're not tying this to existing features in GitLab right now, right? Does that make sense, my question?
Well, I mean, I think we are on some levels. I mean, if you look at currently in the GitLab, in the way we measure cycle analytics and the way we have capabilities of measuring things within GitLab, in fact, we are at some level. But the point of this conversation, to be clear, is less about GitLab, the product. It's more about us having these conversations with our prospects about the metrics that matter in their organizations to try to drive the conversations in that direction. So I
completely understand.
So I don't. But we could go down a path. Yeah. And when you talk about the metrics inside the tool, when we start to talk about value stream management and understanding what the value stream is of how we're managing and measuring the value that we're delivering, we have a whole team focusing on that from a product perspective. And frankly, if you look at where the market is going and you talk to Gartner and Forrester and analysts, value stream management is going to become a more and more hot topic. In fact, Gartner's future work around measuring the tool chain and doing research is going to be more around value stream, as is Forrester. Both of them are moving in that direction. So stay tuned. But I don't want to get too far off onto that. I want to stay on this because I want to make sure that as we come out of this, that the team is able to feel more confident having some conversations and know where there's some resources to learn more, to have those conversations, so that way we can help our customers move down that path.
Just to share with the larger team, I presented the 2018 Dora report to a large customer. It was a year and a half ago now, on site. They loved it. And then they have invited me again to come back, this time virtually, and present on the 19 report results, because there's some fundamental differences there. So I'm in my neck deep right now, studying the report and doing exactly that and sharing on the virtual conference.
Thank you, Hugo. Okay. But you're spot on. The Dora report is brilliant. They wrote a book about it. If you want to go even deeper
Accelerate.
into it. Yeah, accelerate. But just start with these and ask the questions and learn. And I think that's really key. David, do you want to talk about positive business outcomes a little bit? I know I'm watching time. I talked too long.
Yeah, thanks. I think, look, you've heard this before, and you know this. It's important to know who you're talking to. You get delegated who you sound like. So you got to understand, if you're talking to an economic buyer, they're driven by the positive business outcomes. If it's more of the technical buyer, then it's more of those Dora metrics. But what's important is connecting those pieces. Just quick question. Why do you think, and so, well, before I ask the question, so our team has worked closely with John and team this is another iteration in the value framework we're about to launch, but it's available here, is to show which of those Dora metrics, and there's some non-Dora metrics here, which ones map to and line up to our value drivers. So if you understand what your customer's primary value driver is, these are some suggestions of more of the technical metrics that you might want to talk about of the software development process. So question for you. So why do you feel like, why do you think it's important to connect the positive business outcomes with the technical metrics? All right, I'll tell you. Now, I'm sure you've got other insights as well, but it's, you're the subject, again, you're a couple of reasons. You're the subject matter expert. You've seen, we've talked about it. You've seen Nico's video. Many organizations are not doing this, right? So you can provide unique insights that differentiate you from other folks that they're talking to by providing that connection. But probably maybe more importantly than that is this goes hand in hand with conversations with your champion. If you can successfully help your champion understand how those technical metrics empower, enable the positive business outcomes, that's going to help them sell it internally to those folks that sign the checks. So it's super critical, and the best way I can think to reinforce that and make sure you're working with your champion to amplify that message is the mantra, right? So think about what I hear you saying, Mr. or Mrs. Customer, is that these are the positive business outcomes that you're trying to achieve. To achieve those, these are the required capabilities that you need. And you'll probably want to measure those required capabilities with some of these metrics, right? But let's tell you how we do it different and better than anybody else. And don't take my word for it, but here's the proof points. So please make sure you continue to think about application, at least mental model of the mantra, so that you're connecting those positive business outcomes to the metrics. John, one last tip.
Know your proof points. I mean, the proof points that are both in the value framework, the Google Doc, whichever version you're looking at, that's a subset of them. We have them all listed in a detailed web page. Those proof points, I think, are golden. They should be relatively easy to put your hands on. You should be familiar with them depending upon the market you're in and the story you want to tell. They all have tags in them about whether we're talking about CI or CD, about the different use cases that are relevant. They're tagged about what version of GitLab they used, what market they were in. So there's all sorts of little ways you could search that and find them. So you don't necessarily have to memorize them all. Lord knows I don't. But you should be able to read them really quickly and pick out what you're looking for. And then they're all hyperlinked to the actual case study or the actual details. So use those, because those are ways to demonstrate that, in fact, others like them have achieved similar kinds of outcomes. So, and then, the value framework, I can't stress enough. This is the 1-year birthday of the value framework. It was a year ago today that we were all in Dallas wrapping up, as I recall. We finished on Thursday a year ago. And this is when we started this journey, and it's had a huge impact on our ability to connect with our customers and talk about the value in the solution and how we're delivering value and helping them solve real problems. So, I'm not going to sing happy birthday to the value framework, but
do it.
Leverage it. But yeah, go ahead. Adam Olson. I think Adam volunteered.
I was just giving you yes.
Adam volunteered to sing.
I did. Bye. Thanks.
So I see we are at time to take us home. A few calls to action that are listed in the notes doc, but just to verbalize them here. Please do make the time. Carve out some time to review the resources on this page, and I'd encourage you to self-assess. Look, if there's one or two of the tips that we shared today that you would like to personally improve upon, focus on that and ask others about how they do it. If you've got best practices, we don't pretend that this is right. This is our first iteration. We would love feedback. So share the feedback with your program manager for your team of what else do you need? What could be most helpful, so that on our next iteration, we can continue to improve. If you've got best practices to share for any of these, please share those with your program manager, your enablement program manager, because we'd love to capture those. Lastly, make sure you tune in next week. Again, Mahesh is going to do a session on the ROI model. And as always, we'd love and welcome your feedback. So there's a link to the survey in the Google Notes doc. So please let us know how we did and where and how we can improve. All right. Thanks so much, everybody. Appreciate the active participation. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day. Happy birthday.